This is Mr. Pop Culture Phenomenon here, and today I am bringing you guys another Popcast video. Now, today's video is titled, What Made the Nintendo 64 a Legendary Console? And for all of you who did have an N64, that is what we called it, an N64. It was kind of the nickname for the console. So before we dive in, remember to like, listen, and subscribe below. And now, let's get started. So for those of you who can remember, the Nintendo 64 came out in the late 90s. It literally dominated the gaming market between the late 90s and the early 2000s. And I remember, as I believe, it had its release in 1996, and its run ended in roughly 2002. Now, the only reason why it ended in 2002 was because Nintendo came out with the creation of the GameCube. Now, I think the only reason why they came out with the GameCube in 2002 was because they were trying to keep up with the market. And as all you guys can remember, the GameCube was the first system that Nintendo released that came out with the ROM drive disc. Prior to that, Nintendo basically ran everything off of cartridges. Now, I can remember during that 6-year run, what made the N64 so special right off the bat was the variety and genre of games. I mean, from horror, action, adventure. It was a Nintendo system that had RPG and FPS, which are role-playing games and first-person shooters. And the nice thing too that was actually pretty cool about the Nintendo 64 was that it was one of the first gaming consoles that you can at least get in a variety of colors. And I believe depending on which color you got like a certain freebie game that came inside the box. I can remember growing up and we had the see-through green, and I remember with the green see-through N64 you got the Donkey Kong 64. And then I think if you got like the plain black one, it came with like just standard Super Mario 64. So it was kind of like depending on whatever color you got, sometimes you got a pretty cool game inside the box right off the start. So that was pretty awesome. And now the one thing that made Nintendo really, really good was that this is one of the first systems where you had your core characters that brought this system to life. I mean, obviously, when you go into Nintendo's core characters, you had Mario, Luigi, Link, Donkey Kong, Yoshi, Star Fox, and etc. But also, too, a handful of Nintendo's core games got started on this system. And I can remember this is where Super Smash Bros. Originated. You had Mario Kart got its start right here. Mario Party got its start on the N64. And then the nice thing about that is with these core games under Nintendo, they actually kept on reproducing them and kept on replicating them up on basically all of Nintendo's systems moving forward. They just basically, now they got the Mario Party for the Wii, then they had the Mario Party for the GameCube, then they had the Mario Party for the Switch, and same thing with Super Smash Bros., same thing with Mario Kart. And, they kind of built up a decent foundation and kind of just went from there and just built it up. Now, I can remember too, was that even beyond like their core games and their core characters, the N64 too had a handful of games that were equally just as popular, if not pretty huge at the time. if any of you guys can remember, this is when skateboarding started becoming huge, and the Tony Hawk games were like big at that time. You had Banjo Kazooie. This is actually the third highest, most selling Nintendo game of all time, and it's not even one of their core games, and that was GoldenEye 007. And then you had some other ones that were like top of the list too, like Pokemon Snap, WWF No Mercy, and etc. Now, one game that I did like that was a personal favorite of mine that came out at this time was Pokemon Stadium. Now, at the time, Pokemon was like at its peak in America. I mean, they had the trading card games that people collected. The TV show brought in really good ratings. The merchandise was just everywhere. And then they came out with the Pokemon games for the Game Boy. And everybody remembers red, blue, and green version. And then they came out with yellow, which was the one you could get Pikachu in. But they made it cool with the video game of Pokemon Stadium that released on N64 that you can hook up a control pack to the back of the controller and actually plug in your own Game Boy games and play it right off the N64. And that was kind of cool and like something that I thought that was pretty nifty that Nintendo did. And I mean, now, you're kind of seeing how like big at this time this system really was. And I think for their 6-year run, they literally was just like at a peak for like the whole entire 6 years. Now, one thing that I can remember though too was like, even though they didn't have the ROM drive, like compared to the Dreamcast and the PlayStations that were out at that time, and they were still cartridges, the one difference between the ROM drives and the cartridges was, at least with the cartridges, rarely did you have like defects on them, or were they ever get defective. The durability on them was actually pretty remarkable. I mean, when you look at the ROM drives and the disc, if they got scratched too badly, or if they got just slightly bent out of shape or anything like that along those lines, those ROM drives discs wouldn't play the same on those actual systems. So I think for its time, for it to still be competitive and not be like a ROM drive like everybody else, and to still be using cartridges through '06, when cartridges are kind of like a 80s and early 90s thing, really showed you like beyond the other mechanisms how to make a good system without having to be graphically competitive or storage wise competitive. They were really going into the simple bliss of just making a good game and just having fun. And that's what I liked. I mean, everybody knew cartridges were popular in late 80s, early 90s. And then everyone was switching over to the ROM drives. And for them to still have a competitive system out there going into the early to mid 2000s, still using cartridges and still being head and shoulders one of the top competitors in that market, it just really goes to show you that the creators behind Nintendo knew what they were doing. And I mean, and when you go into it too, I mean, you had a good amount of accessories that came with this one. I can remember they had the expansion pack, the rumble pack, the controller pack. They had built-in keyboards and modems. They had a Aussie Wheel 64 for the driving games that were on the N64. And a handful of them came with actual cleaning kits for the consoles. So I really thought that, a handful of side accessories compared to some of the other systems that they had, and just like the small end features, and just to be as good as they were with basically maneuvering around their core games and their core characters was really, really awesome. And I believe too, kind of moving forward with my little small summary of the N64. Now, they had that 6-year run from 96 to I believe 2002. And I just believe that, like, I've seen other systems that have been out longer, but they're kind of either peaking at the beginning and just maintaining as you go. But this system really, like, stayed at a height for like that whole entire 6 year time frame, which was really, really awesome. And I do believe when you're kind of looking at the time frame, the market, it was the start of Nintendo's core characters. It was the start of Nintendo's core games. And at the time where, I mean, it was literally like early 2000s that you still had a competitive system out there that was still competing with PC games, PlayStation games, and like even the Dreamcast. And all of them at that time were like running on ROM drives. And everybody knows with ROM drives, you can put more content on it, and you can actually have higher and better graphics on your actual video games. But for them to not go that route, at least not till later on down the road, and still up until the 2000s be as strong as they were, I'm definitely gonna give this system a rating of an A+. And I tip my hat to you, Nintendo, because it was one of the most cherishable and favorite, absolute favorite video game systems of my childhood. So once again, this is Mr. Pop Culture Phenomenon here, and I hope you guys like the content. Remember to like, listen, and subscribe below. And until the next video, take care. Have a good day.